What if in Revenge of the Sith, Obi Wan was defeated by General Grievous? Let's see how that would change things. So in this new timeline, everything would be the same as it was in the original timeline until General Grievous throws Obi Wan off the platform they were fighting on. Unlike in the original timeline, here, Obi Wan would not be able to hold on, and as a result would fall into the sinkhole below and injure his spine as he hit his back on a rock on his way down. But in the end, Obi Wan would be saved by his clone troopers, who by this point were pretty much swarming the place. And as for General Grievous, immediately after throwing Obi Wan off the platform, Grievous would get into his ship and escape Utapau. And where would Grievous be going? Well, we will get to that later on in the video. But for now, let's turn our attention to Anakin Skywalker. So in the original timeline, when Obi-Wan finds Grievous on Utapau, Mace Windu sends Anakin to Palpatine to inform Palpatine that Grievous has been found, which is ultimately when Palpatine, or Sidious, reveals his Sith identity to Anakin. But in this new timeline, when Anakin went to Palpatine with the news of Grievous being discovered, Palpatine would sense that Grievous' demise would not occur on Utapau, and that as a result, the war would go on for longer. And so, because of this, Palpatine would not reveal his Sith identity to Anakin here, because Palpatine knows that if Grievous stays alive, that keeps the Separatist movement alive, and that if he, Palpatine, were to execute his grand plan now and create the Empire, then that would cause systems that are not happy with this new Empire to flock to the Separatist alliance, which would further strengthen the Separatists and Grievous. But still, even if that were to happen, Palpatine or Sidious was also the mind behind the Separatist alliance. So Palpatine knew that no matter how strong the Separatists got, they would still be answering to him. Or at least, that was the case until now. Because with Count Dooku gone, the unpredictable General Grievous was left to lead the Separatist alliance by himself. And if for some reason the unpredictable General Grievous decides that Sidious wasn't necessary to lead the Separatists, especially with the new systems that would join the fold if the Empire forms, that would cause a problem to Palpatine. So ultimately, for a clean execution of his plan, Palpatine would decide that Grievous needed to go first. Grievous had outlived his purpose, and now the only purpose Grievous had left was to die, Palpatine would think. Also, side note, as for why Sidious wouldn't just send Grievous to Mustafar so that Anakin can kill Grievous later, well, that would be because while Anakin is fully capable of defeating Grievous, Grievous would always be guarded by his own Magna Guards. So if Grievous and his Magna Guards were on Mustafar, Anakin would be able to defeat them, but that would take time. Time which might allow some of the Separatist leaders to escape Mustafar. And for that reason, Sidious would not want Grievous on Mustafar. And so, with all that decided, when Anakin came to Palpatine with the news of Grievous being discovered, Palpatine would simply tell Anakin that hopefully the war would come to an end soon. To which, like in the original timeline, Anakin would say that he should have also been there with Kenobi, following which Palpatine would tell Anakin that the Council does not trust Anakin, further pushing Anakin away from the Jedi and towards the dark side. But in the end, after speaking for a while, Anakin will leave Palpatine's office, gaining no new insight into Palpatine. And as for Palpatine, after Anakin leaves, he would sit on his office chair and look across the Coruscant skyline as the evening fell, with absolute confidence that everything would go according to his plan. And as for Skywalker, when he returned to the temple, Mace Windu would share some bad news with Anakin. And this news was of course that of Grievous escaping Utapau, and that of Obi-Wan being grievously injured. So from Master Windu, Anakin will learn that due to the severe nature of Obi-Wan's injuries, Obi-Wan would need to spend at least a few weeks inside a bacta tank. And having heard all this, Anakin would tell Windu that he, Anakin, will go after Grievous, which Windu would of course not agree with, telling Anakin that Anakin already has a very important task on Coruscant, which was to keep an eye on the Chancellor. But then Windu would also add the following: "Your former apprentice is coming here, Skywalker, with Darth Maul. She seemed like she had something she wanted to share with you." Hearing this would grab Anakin's attention, but before Anakin could say anything else, Mace would tell Anakin that he, Mace, will deal with Grievous. Seeing no point in arguing, Anakin would then ask Mace if they know where Grievous is, to which Mace would say that Grievous would run and hide like he always does, and that soon he will be discovered. And so, with nothing more to say, Anakin would bow and leave. So later on, with Order 66 not being executed, Ahsoka and Rex would arrive on Coruscant, with Darth Maul inside of a Mandalorian force dampening vault. And soon after being brought to Coruscant, Maul would be transported to the Republic Judiciary Central Detention Center, which was a high-security prison on Coruscant. Captain Rex would help oversee this prisoner transportation, while Ahsoka, without wasting any time, would walk up to Anakin, who was waiting for her, and begin telling Anakin everything that Maul said about Anakin and Darth Sidious. Ahsoka would tell Anakin of how Maul orchestrated the war on Mandalore with the goal of bringing Anakin there to kill him, because according to Maul, for a long time now, Anakin has been manipulated into ultimately becoming the apprentice of Darth Sidious. And Maul, of course, wanted to stop this, simply because he wanted to deprive Sidious of his prized pupil, which is what Maul called Anakin. Ahsoka would also go on to tell Anakin that, according to Maul, Darth Sidious is in the shadows, controlling everything, including the Republic, which is exactly what Count Dooku told Obi Wan on Geonosis. So hearing all of this would leave Anakin puzzled. Who could be manipulating him into becoming a Sith? Anakin would wonder. Maul must be lying. He has to be, Anakin would tell Ahsoka. To which Ahsoka would say that she wishes she could believe Anakin. And then Ahsoka would tell Anakin something else about Maul. About how Maul wanted to fall to his death, rather than be captured and be taken to Coruscant. Ahsoka would tell Anakin how when Maul said this, she, Ahsoka, could sense that Maul was afraid of Darth Sidious. At this point, Anakin would become slightly agitated and would ask Ahsoka if she believes that he, Anakin, is turning into a Sith. Ahsoka would immediately say that she doesn't, just that she doesn't know what to make of everything. Anakin would then turn around and stay silent as he was even more confused than Ahsoka. At which point, Ahsoka would walk closer to Anakin and ask him, with some hesitation, if Anakin has ever felt like anyone around him was trying to lead him away from the Jedi or away from the light side. Anakin would again prepare to say that there is no one, but before those words could escape his mouth, for some reason the words of Chancellor Palpatine entered his mind. Specifically what Palpatine told him earlier about how the Jedi do not trust Anakin. Anakin would then think of how Palpatine has always been critical of the Jedi. He often spoke of how the Jedi do not trust Anakin. And more recently, Palpatine did share with him a Sith legend, the one of Darth Plagueis, a Sith who could, using his powers, keep people from dying. These would be the thoughts going through Anakin's mind. But quickly, as soon as these thoughts entered his mind, Anakin would find ways to dismiss them. Palpatine wasn't the only one critical of the Jedi. Many in the Senate were dissatisfied with how the Jedi were handling things. And as for how Palpatine knows of the Sith legend of Darth Plagueis, well, ever since Darth Maul was discovered on Naboo and confirmed to be a Sith, Palpatine had been researching Sith history. So that is how he knows of the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise, Anakin would tell himself. So a quick side note, Palpatine telling Anakin that Palpatine has been studying Sith history is actually something that we see in the novelization for Revenge of the Sith. So that is the reason why Anakin does not question Palpatine on his knowledge of the Sith. Anyways, back to the story. So at this point, as Anakin stands there silent, his mind buried in thoughts, Ahsoka would speak again. She would tell Anakin that Darth Sidious might be influencing everything, the Republic and even Anakin, not directly, but through other people. So the reason Ahsoka suspects this is because Maul did tell her that Darth Sidious has always been in the shadows. Ahsoka would then go on to tell Anakin that if what Maul and even what Count Dooku said is true, then this Darth Sidious has proven himself capable of manipulating the wills of many in the Republic Senate and then using them to do his bidding. And hearing this, Anakin's mind would begin to entertain a thought. If Darth Sidious really wanted to control the Republic, then the Sith Lord would have to gain some amount of control over Chancellor Palpatine, making Palpatine a target for Darth Sidious's manipulations. But Palpatine was a strong, bold man. He was definitely not weak-willed. But then again, the true powers of Darth Sidious were unknown, Anakin would tell himself. Anakin would then again think of how Palpatine has always been critical of the Jedi, and at this point, Anakin, with a hint of hesitation in his voice, would say the following to Ahsoka. If we were to assume that that monster wasn't completely lying, I believe the Chancellor might be in danger. Darth Sidious may have made the Chancellor his target. Ahsoka would then ask Anakin why he believes that, to which Anakin would say that, other than Obi Wan, Chancellor Palpatine is really the only person that Anakin is close to. So if Darth Sidious wanted to maintain control over the Republic, or turn Anakin away from the light, Darth Sidious would need Palpatine under his thumb, Anakin would say. And even though she didn't want to believe it, this would make sense to Ahsoka. Palpatine had always been close to Anakin, and he was also the most powerful person in the Galactic Republic. And so, having realized all of this, Ahsoka would tell Anakin, and herself, that they will know more when the Council interrogates Darth Maul. And it is only now, when Ahsoka says this, that both Ahsoka and Anakin consider how the Council would react if Maul told them that Anakin is being manipulated to the dark side. But then, having thought of this, Anakin would tell Ahsoka that it would be best if they worried about one problem at a time. And now, let's move on to Darth Maul. So soon after he was brought to Coruscant, Maul would be taken to a high-security prison. And after Maul was secured in prison, the Jedi Council, or what remained of it on Coruscant at the time, wanted to interrogate Maul on what Maul knew of Darth Sidious. But before the Jedi could begin their interrogation, Sidious, or Chancellor Palpatine, would tell the Coruscant officials that he, Palpatine, wanted to see this Sith in person. And so, under the direct orders of Supreme Chancellor Palpatine, the Coruscant Guard would take Palpatine, along with his own personal Red Guards, to see Maul. But before Palpatine could reach Maul, Mace Windu and the other Masters would show up and stop Palpatine, telling Palpatine that Maul is dangerous and that the Jedi will arrange for Chancellor Palpatine to meet with Maul when it is safe. Palpatine would argue against this, telling Mace Windu that Palpatine's Red Guards are more than capable of protecting him from Maul. But Master Windu would disagree, and ultimately Palpatine would relent and tell Master Windu that he, Palpatine, trusts the Jedi Council to do what is needed. And after this conversation, the Jedi Masters would head on over to Maul's cell, and Palpatine would leave the prison. But still, Chancellor Palpatine would be watching the interrogation of Maul as it happened through a live holofeed. And as for Ahsoka and Anakin, they too would be watching as Mace Windu and the other Masters interrogated Maul. But like Palpatine, Anakin and Ahsoka would also be watching from a different location, because they would feel that Anakin's presence would impede the interrogation. Maul did do everything he did on Mandalore to kill Anakin, to deprive Sidious of his prized pupil, as Maul said. So knowing this, Anakin and Ahsoka would feel that if Anakin was with the other Masters as they interrogated Maul, Maul's focus might shift to where it wasn't needed. And so they decided to watch from a distance. And so at this point, with Palpatine, Ahsoka, and Anakin watching, the interrogation of Darth Maul would begin. So by now, to perform the interrogation, Maul would be brought out of the Mandalorian vault he was trapped in. This of course made Maul dangerous, but it wasn't a danger that 4 trained Jedi Masters could not handle. So as the interrogation began, Mace Windu would ask Maul several questions, mostly aimed at gathering insight into Darth Sidious. But Maul, maintaining his typical sinister calm, would not reveal much, instead opting to taunt the Jedi for their arrogance and dropping cryptic hints about Sidious's influence over the Republic. But during all of his rambling, Maul, knowingly or unknowingly, would refer to Sidious as his master, which Mace Windu would take note of. But that's pretty much all the Jedi would be able to learn from Maul's words. So the reason why Maul wouldn't just tell the Jedi that Palpatine is Sidious would be because Maul knew that the Republic was under the complete control of his former master, and that even if he told the Jedi that Palpatine was Sidious, there was no guarantee that the Jedi would believe him, and even if they did, Maul was sure that Palpatine would have a contingency plan, like he always did. If he didn't, he would not have let Maul end up on Coruscant in the first place. And on top of that, Maul knew the cruelty that Sidious was capable of. And in the Clone Wars, after Maul is defeated by Sidious, Maul does ask Sidious for mercy, as Sidious is torturing Maul. So basically, the reason why Maul doesn't tell the Jedi that Palpatine is Sidious is because he believes that it wouldn't do him any good, and that Palpatine might show him mercy and kill him quickly if he didn't cause any problems by telling the Jedi that Sidious was the Supreme Chancellor of the Republic. And so the interrogation of Darth Maul would go on for a short while without any results, and eventually Mace and the other Masters would realize that they aren't going to be able to extract much information by simply asking Maul questions. So instead, the Masters decide to change tactics. They would decide to probe Maul's mind, which would look similar to how the Jedi interrogated Cad Bane in the Clone Wars. And so, as the Jedi Masters tried to tear into Maul's mind, Maul would of course resist. He was a trained Sith after all, but despite Maul's resistance, his defenses would eventually crack, and bits of information from Maul's mind would begin to come to the light. But this would not help the Jedi answer any of their questions, as all they could see in Maul at this point was Maul's anger and pain, which didn't reveal anything. And so, to access more information from Maul, the Masters would push harder into Maul's mind. They would start peering into Maul's memories now, and all they would see would again be pain, screaming, anger, Sith lightning. But moments later, as they kept going, Mace and the other Masters would see the source from which all of Maul's anger and resentment came from. Maul both feared and hated this individual, Mace Windu would see. And then, as the Jedi kept looking into Maul's mind, they saw the face of this individual that Maul was so afraid of. And this face bore an eerie resemblance to that of Chancellor Palpatine. As soon as he saw this, Mace let go of Maul's mind. Partially because if he and the other masters kept going on, Maul's mind would completely break down, but mostly, Mace and the others stopped because of what Maul's deranged mind showed them. The masters would then look at each of their faces, bearing an expression of disbelief. Suddenly everything made sense to Mace. Count Dooku was right. The Republic was under the control of the Sith. But Darth Sidious was not hiding in the shadows, not really. All these years, Darth Sidious was right under their noses, and yet the Jedi could not sense him. The dark side had truly clouded their vision, Mace Windu would think. For a moment, Mace would wonder if Maul was somehow tricking them, setting the Jedi against the Chancellor. But they were looking directly into Maul's memories. It couldn't be false, Mace would tell himself. And on top of that, Chancellor Palpatine being Darth Sidious would make a lot of sense to Mace. If the Sith truly want to take over the Republic, doing so by legal means would be the smartest way to go about it, Mace would realize. The Sith had changed over the past millennia. They had evolved. That is what ultimately all of this meant. But even as all this was going through his mind, Mace Windu would maintain composure and along with the other masters, leave Maul's cell. And then Mace Windu, knowing full well that Palpatine was watching, would tell the guards who were stationed outside Maul's cell that nothing valuable was gleaned from this interrogation and that they will have to continue later when Maul's strength returns. And so the Jedi would leave and Maul would be placed back into his Mandalorian vault. And seeing all of this, a sinister smile would form on Palpatine's face. He knew that the Jedi had seen something, but Palpatine also knew that the Jedi couldn't arrest Palpatine based on anything that Maul would tell them, voluntarily or involuntarily. And that's because Maul would not be seen as a credible witness, and like Mace Windu says in the original timeline, Palpatine had complete control over the Senate and the courts. So if the Jedi were to arrest Palpatine and cite Maul's testimony as evidence for Palpatine's wrongdoings, well, Palpatine and the Jedi knew that the Senate was not going to accept it, because no one knew who Maul was, and Sidious could easily argue that the Jedi are lying, and that he has nothing to do with Maul. And this was true. Sidious was always careful not to leave anything connecting him with Maul. So basically, there was no way the Jedi could prove legally from Maul's testimony alone that Palpatine was Sidious and was behind everything. It would be a different case, however, if the Jedi were to find out from someone like Anakin Skywalker that Palpatine was a Sith. Because unlike Maul, Anakin would be credible. Anakin was known as the hero of the Clone Wars and was a high-ranking general in the Republic Army, which is why in the original timeline, the Jedi immediately try to arrest Palpatine once Anakin tells them that Palpatine is Sidious. But with Maul, they couldn't do this, especially since here the information that the Jedi learned from Maul wasn't even given by Maul voluntarily. But while all that was true, Palpatine did know that the Jedi might now be on to him. But still, Palpatine was confident that his plans cannot be foiled. So basically, Palpatine would just sit there while holding on to the firm belief that everything will transpire as he planned. As for Anakin, who was also watching this ordeal with Ahsoka, as soon as the masters leave Maul's cell, Anakin would rush over to Mace and ask Mace Windu if they managed to find anything, to which Mace would tell Anakin that they could not find anything of use. So the reason why Mace is not telling Anakin that Palpatine might be Sidious is because Mace does not trust Anakin. And the last thing Mace Windu would want right now would be for Anakin to take this information to Chancellor Palpatine. And so because of this, Mace Windu would not tell Anakin anything, simply telling Skywalker that the interrogations will have to continue. This would disappoint Anakin and Ahsoka. But immediately following this, Mace Windu would also tell Anakin that the other masters can deal with Maul, and that Mace could use the help of Anakin and Ahsoka if she is willing to track down Grievous. This would surprise Anakin because hours ago, Mace was telling him that Anakin should not leave Coruscant. So the reason that Mace Windu changes his mind is, of course, he now suspects Sidious to be Palpatine, and as we see in Revenge of the Sith, Mace has always been of the opinion that it is dangerous putting Palpatine and Anakin together, and now, in this timeline, Mace has an even bigger reason to believe so. But Anakin, even though he was suspicious that Mace is hiding something, would agree with Mace Windu, telling Mace that he, Anakin, will go with him to find Grievous. But Anakin did, however, consider for a moment if he should stay on Coruscant to keep an eye on the Chancellor, because now he suspects that Darth Sidious might be manipulating the Chancellor. But quickly Anakin would realize that finding Grievous could lead them to Sidious, in which case he will be able to stop Sidious and save pretty much everyone, including the Chancellor. Anakin would then look at Ahsoka, and she would also say that she would help with this. Mace would then leave, but not before telling Ahsoka and Anakin that they will need to leave Coruscant within a few hours, and that they should quickly make whatever preparations they need to make. Anakin would then ask Mace where exactly they're going, to which Mace would say that he will tell them on the way. And after saying that, Mace would walk away. Anyways, following this, Anakin would speak with Ahsoka for a while, visit Obi Wan in his bacta tank, and finally call Padme and tell her that he is leaving Coruscant but would be back very soon. And then, having done all this, Anakin would be fully prepared to depart Coruscant with Ahsoka and Mace. Anakin would, however, consider for a moment telling Chancellor Palpatine that he was leaving, but would then quickly decide against it. If Darth Sidious was indeed controlling Palpatine, it wouldn't be wise to relay important information to the Chancellor, Anakin would think. And so with all that decided, Anakin would join Ahsoka in the hangar, and they would wait for Mace Windu. And as for Mace, after walking away from Anakin and Ahsoka, Mace would contact Yoda, telling the Grand Master of the Jedi Order everything that he, Mace, learned from Maul. About how Mace believes Palpatine to be Sidious, how it's not safe to leave Anakin on Coruscant near Palpatine, and how Mace is planning on taking Anakin and Ahsoka, along with Master Fisto, to go after Grievous, mainly with the intention of keeping a very close eye on Skywalker. Master Yoda would listen to all of this, and in a disappointed tone would say that the Jedi, including himself, are blind if they couldn't sense Sidious if he was indeed Palpatine. Mace would not say anything to this, but Yoda would see that Mace agrees with Yoda's statement. Mace would then say that once Grievous has been found, they might be able to gather enough evidence to question Palpatine. As a response, Yoda would ask Mace if they know where Grievous is, to which Mace would say that clone intelligence, just like how it discovered Grievous hiding out on Utapau, has now apparently discovered Grievous hiding out in the Outer Rim in the Drexel system. So side note, not long after escaping Utapau, Grievous would have contacted Sidious, and Sidious, wanting to get rid of Grievous as soon as possible, would have told Grievous to go to Drexel, and then after doing so, Sidious would have discreetly passed along this information to Clone Intelligence, which is similar to how Sidious informed Clone Intelligence that Grievous was hiding out on Utapau. Anyways, after hearing Mace say that Grievous is on Drexel, Yoda would rub his head and tell Mace and the others that if Palpatine is indeed Sidious, then they, the Jedi, might be playing right into Palpatine's hands, and that they now needed to be extremely careful. And having said this, Yoda would also say that he will soon be returning to Coruscant from Kashyyyk, because now the threat on Coruscant is much bigger than anything on Kashyyyk. Yoda would also add that until the time is right, they shouldn't do anything to indicate in any way that they suspect the Chancellor. Mace and the others would agree, and Mace would tell Yoda that he will inform Yoda as soon as he has new information. And with that being said, they would end the call, and Mace would go back to the hangar to meet with Anakin and Ahsoka. And then, without wasting any time, Mace, Ahsoka, and Anakin would depart from Coruscant. And it is only now, at this moment, that Mace would tell Skywalker and Ahsoka where they were going. So earlier, when Grievous fled Utapau, which was being swarmed by clone troopers, the clones did indeed notice a small ship leaving the planet. But upon recognizing the ship as Grievous's customized Belbelab 22 starfighter, also known as the Soulless One, which was nicknamed the Spineless One by many of the clone troopers, because Grievous always had a habit of fleeing. But anyways, upon identifying the ship, the clones couldn't shoot it down, but they did manage to shoot a tracker onto Grievous' ship, which was similar to the tracker that Obi Wan used on Jango Fett's ship, the Slave One, in Attack of the Clones. But anyways, a while later, the clones detected where Grievous' ship ended up in, and in the absence of Obi Wan, this information was instead transmitted to the Master of the Order, Mace Windu. And upon examining it, Mace Windu figured that this tracking data confirmed what Clone Intelligence had informed. Grievous' ship has been tracked to Drexel. But there was something unique about the tracking data. So before heading over to Drexel, Grievous had apparently made a pit stop somewhere else. And according to the tracking data from Grievous' ship, this stop was made by Grievous in the Mustafar system. So side note, the reason why Grievous went to Mustafar is because, due to the distance from Coruscant, Grievous couldn't contact Sidious directly from his ship as he escaped Utapau. This, by the way, is the same thing that happens to Obi Wan when he goes to Geonosis in Attack of the Clones. He's not able to contact Coruscant from Geonosis, so the same thing happens to Grievous. He could not contact Sidious from the Outer Rim, so Grievous, in his desperation, would head on over to Mustafar to use the long-range communicator there, which is when Sidious told Grievous to go hide out in Drexel. And while doing this, Grievous, of course, did not check if his ship was being tracked, which might seem like a careless move, but then again, Grievous was the same guy who got caught by Gungans. Also, since Mace Windu could only review this information after he and the other masters finished interrogating Maul, he would not inform Chancellor Palpatine of Grievous' detour to Mustafar. In fact, just to be safe, not knowing if their holotransmissions were being spied upon, Mace Windu didn't even tell Yoda that Grievous went to Mustafar. In fact, the only people Mace would share this information with would be Anakin and Ahsoka when they entered hyperspace. Mace would tell Anakin and Ahsoka that Grievous' ship was tracked to Mustafar before it went over to Drexel, and that they should go to Mustafar to see why Grievous went there. Hearing this, Anakin would ask Windu if they run the risk of Grievous escaping if they spend too much time on Mustafar, To which Master Windu would say that Master Fisto is dealing with the situation on Drexel, and that he, Mace, senses something of grave importance on Mustafar. In response, Anakin would simply say, "Let's hope so," and with that, the Jedi would make their way over to Mustafar. And following the tracking data from Grievous' ship, they would soon come upon a landing platform on Mustafar. To avoid detection, Mace Windu would land their ship quite a distance away from this landing platform. And once they landed, Mace and Anakin would examine this landing platform and the mining facility connected to it through electro binoculars. And after doing so, they will find that the place was not being heavily guarded. And then the three would come up with a plan. Mace and Anakin would explore this possible separatist hideout, while Ahsoka stayed in the ship as backup. All three would agree to the plan, and then Mace and Anakin would carefully make their way through this landscape, which was intermittent with lava rivers. But eventually, the two Jedi would reach this mining facility, and then, due to the lack of security, the two Jedi would be able to simply walk into this structure, inside of which they would find every single leader of the Separatist Alliance, and a few B-1 battle droids, which would pose no challenge to Mace and Anakin. And so, with every single Separatist leader found, Mace would tell Ahsoka to send word to the 187th Legion of Clone Troopers to arrive on Mustafar, to arrest and take the Separatist leaders back to Coruscant. Ahsoka would do so, while she would tell Windu and Anakin that the clones would be arriving shortly. And in the meantime, Windu would begin the interrogation of the Separatist leaders right there on Mustafar. Windu would sense that of the Separatists, the most frightened was Newt Gunray. And after sensing this, Mace would walk over to Newt Gunray and tell him that for crimes committed against multiple systems and for the death of millions, he, Mace, can execute every single one of them right then and there. Hearing this would surprise Anakin, though he would be fine with Mace killing every single Separatist leader, especially Newt Gunray. But Anakin knew that the Separatists held valuable information and that Mace was simply bluffing. But the Separatists did not know this. So immediately after Mace Windu made his threat, the Nemoidian Viceroy of the Trade Federation and Separatist leader Newt Gunray would scream the following in a frightened tone: "We only want peace, that's what Lord Sidious promised us." Hearing this, Mace would simply ask, "Darth Sidious?" And Gunray would aggressively nod. And a few short moments later, Mace would ask Gunray if Gunray knows who Sidious really is. To which Gunray would say that neither he nor the other Separatists know the real identity of Lord Sidious. And Mace would of course be able to sense that they were not lying. At this point, Mace would walk away, and then Mace would immediately contact Yoda. Mace would then inform Yoda of everything that happened and ask the Grandmaster how they should proceed. Yoda would tell Mace that since the Separatists cannot verify the identity of Sidious, they can't arrest Palpatine. But Yoda would go on to say that Mace should immediately inform the citizens of the Republic and the Senate that it was a Sith Lord leading the Separatists. So Yoda's reasoning for this would be pretty straightforward. If the Jedi were to end the war, that would regain them the support of the Senate and the citizens of the Republic, which has been waning ever since the Clone Wars began. And on top of that, letting everyone know that it was a Sith Lord, the ancient enemy of the Jedi, who was behind the Separatists, would make it possible to arrest Palpatine on the basis of suspicion if it was proven that Palpatine was a Sith. So quick side note, the reason for that is because being a Sith was not illegal in the Republic. In fact, in the novelization for Revenge of the Sith, Palpatine does admit to the Republic that he is a Sith, and that the Constitution of the Republic allows for one to be a Sith. But in this timeline, if the Senate were to be informed that it was a Sith who was behind the Separatists, then even though not illegal, if Palpatine were to be outed as a Sith, that would raise significant suspicion against Palpatine. And so, following Yoda's advice, Mace, after calling Anakin to his side, would announce to the galaxy, through the holonet, that the Clone Wars is over, and that the Separatist leaders have been arrested. But then Mace would speak of how the real enemy is still out there. Mace would go on to explain that this real enemy is the Sith, specifically a Sith Lord by the name of Darth Sidious. And having said this, Mace would force Newt Gunray to confess before the Republic of how he met Sidious and how Sidious has been leading them from the shadows for years at this point. Anyways, after all of that was broadcasted to the Republic, Mace would order the clones to transport the Separatists to the galactic capital so they could be put on trial. But Mace, Ahsoka, and Anakin would not go to Coruscant. Instead, along with a good number of clones, the Jedi would head on over to Drexel to help out Master Fisto and his troopers in taking down Grievous. And once the Jedi got to Drexel with their clone troopers, they would join with Kit Fisto and his forces against Grievous. This would end up being a somewhat fierce battle, but in the end, Mace and Anakin would be left fighting Grievous, while Ahsoka helped Master Fisto and the other clones take on Grievous's battle droids. And as for how the Grievous versus Anakin and Mace fight would go, Well, initially Grievous would take out his 4 lightsabers and attempt to use some of the Jedi arts that Count Dooku taught him, and moments later Grievous would be left dismembered on the floor, unable to move. At which point, Grievous would be arrested and taken to Coruscant, just like the other Separatist leaders. And as for Palpatine, he only found out about all of this along with the rest of the Republic. They must have tracked Grievous, Palpatine quickly summarized. The cyborg was a foolish coward who should have been dealt with much earlier, Palpatine told himself. But quickly coming to his senses, Palpatine's psychopath mind thought of how to deal with the situation. Both Grievous and the Separatist leaders have been arrested. The droid army has been deactivated. The Senate and the Republic's distaste in the Jedi had begun to dissipate. And to make everything worse, the Republic now knows it was a Sith Lord who was behind the Separatists, and that too directly from the mouths of the Separatist leaders. No one could argue that the Jedi were making this up. This was the situation that his own overconfidence got him into, Sidious would think. Palpatine still could, however, through Anakin or otherwise, try and get the Jedi to attack him, then kill the Jedi, and execute Order 66. But the problem with that plan, as Sidious would quickly realize, was that if the Jedi were to take the information that Palpatine was a Sith directly to the Senate, instead of trying to arrest him, then it wouldn't be treason, and he would not be able to execute Order 66. And the Senate, given how they know that the Sith was behind the Separatists, might even give Jedi the permission to arrest Palpatine. So Sidious would ultimately realize that trying to get the Jedi to attack him by revealing that he was a Sith to Anakin is very risky. And as for turning Anakin to the dark side, there too, Sidious would be met with the same problem. He couldn't reveal to Anakin that he was a Sith, because if he does that, things could go 2 ways. One probability would be Anakin keeping that to himself, in the hopes that Palpatine might be able to save Padme, which Palpatine knew that he wouldn't be able to do, because Palpatine killed Plagueis before he learned from Plagueis how to keep someone from dying. So Padme would die, and Anakin would turn against him. The other possibility would be Anakin telling the High Council that Palpatine was a Sith, which again runs the risk of Palpatine getting arrested. So in the end, after all this thinking, Palpatine would come to the conclusion that his overconfidence has pretty much foiled his plan and the revenge of the Sith. A failure comparable to that of Darth Gravid, who by the way was a Bayonet Sith who for some reason became drawn to the light side and destroyed a lot of Sith knowledge, especially the ability of essence transfer. And so at this point, with Sidious and the Jedi in sort of a stalemate, what would happen next? Well, that would be discussed in part 2 of this video, What If Order 66 Failed, which I will be making in the future. And this will be it for part 1 of the series. But before you leave, if you want to support the channel and get early access to my videos and access to exclusive videos which wouldn't be appearing on the channel for months, do check out my Patreon for $1 or more a month if you have the time. Link is in the description, I think. Anyways, goodbye and have a good day or night.